On this edition of Alberta Dugout Stories, the podcast, we visit with one of the members of our All-2010s team. Calgary's Emerson Frostad talks about his journey in baseball and more. Welcome to episode 72 of Alberta Dugout Stories, the podcast. I'm Joe McFarland. Before we get started with our interview this week, we wanted to start off by congratulating Derek Jeter and Larry Walker on being inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame. That announcement was made earlier this week, and both are obviously very deserving candidates for Cooperstown. Now, as we all know, Walker becomes the second Canadian to get the phone call, with the first being Ferguson Jenkins. The Maple Ridge, BC native actually has a bit of a connection to our guest on this edition of the podcast. Emerson Frostad was born in Vancouver but raised in Calgary and was one of the original graduates of the Calgary Dogs program before it moved to Okotoks. He was drafted by the Texas Rangers in the 13th round of the 2003 MLB draft, and he played professionally until 2013, including parts of 4 seasons in AAA ball. Frostad also represented Canada at a number of major events, including the 2008 Olympics and the 2011 Pan Am Games, and it was that connection to Baseball Canada where he got to work with Walker, who was a coach for the team on a few of those occasions. We talked about that and much more earlier this week. Emerson, welcome to the podcast, and thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Let's start off with that news of the day. Your thoughts on Larry Walker getting inducted into the Hall of Fame, a guy that you worked with a time or two.
Yeah, it's an incredible day for Canadian baseball. It was, for many of us, it was a day that was a long time coming. I know he had to wait a little longer than most of us would have liked, but for him to get in and to finally be able to call himself a Hall of Famer, it's a big day for Canadian baseball. And my experience with Larry personally on the Canadian national team was exceptional. He was a great guy. He was amazing to have around for the younger players, and just a guy that played at such a high level for so long. The value he brought to the team was incredible, and it was really a huge learning experience for all us young guys to have him around. So it was a huge day yesterday for us.
How big of a role did he play, not just in how you performed on the field with Team Canada, but also just in growing up in baseball and looking and trying to find those Canadians who made it to pro ball and beyond to be able to say, hey, if he did it, I can do it too?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, the playing relationship started much later on, but yeah, going back to my childhood, he was it for Canadian baseball, at least for hitters at the time. He was, you know, the top performer, and he was a guy that you could look to and see. He grew up in Canada. He played in Canada, and you know, I know Larry talks a lot about being a little behind some of our U.S. counterparts. You know, growing up, we just don't get to play as much. So to see a guy like him actually make it and perform and be an all-star and a Gold Glover, it was incredible to see. And it really, you know, as I progressed through high school and all that, to see a guy like him, you know, winning MVPs as well, just to be able to do that from Canada, it was huge for myself and for my teammates.
Now, speaking of your journey, let's get into it. I mean, you're born in Vancouver, but you came out to Calgary, part of the original Calgary Dogs program. Walk us through kind of growing up in Western Canada, thinking and knowing that hockey was going to be front and center for so many people, and yet you decided to go a different route.
Yeah. My dad and grandpa were both big baseball fans. My grandpa played baseball growing up as well, so it was in the family. I played hockey as well till I was about 12 or 13. So the typical Canadian upbringing of playing hockey, but it got to a point shortly after we moved to Calgary. We moved here when I was 10 years old, so right at the start of Little League. It was shortly after that, there was a group of us with Cal West Little League that ended up being the first iteration of the Dogs, that we all just got along so well. We were all fairly good players. We just wanted that extra bit more to be able to play more than 20 games a summer, and we really just loved the sport. So fortunately a good group of our dads, including John Urcandia, started the dogs program, but it was really a group of us that just loved playing, and that was part of the reason why I went the baseball route rather than hockey. It was just so much fun to be around the guys that ended up forming that part of that dogs program.
What was it like growing up trying to make it in a sport that Canada and Alberta isn't really all that well known for?
Yeah, totally. It was, it's hard to dream that big, honestly, playing baseball in Alberta. It was about the time just before the dogs started, I believe. Chris Rietsma was coming up through Babe Ruth here, and to see, I went and watched a few of his games, and to see, 30, 40, 50 scouts in the stands for a pitcher from Calgary, that was kind of an eye-opening experience. And then obviously guys like Larry Walker and a few others playing in the big leagues, that experience of seeing those guys kind of sparked the belief that maybe we could take this to a college and pro level. But before that, it was just hard to imagine being able to do that. But I think I just think back on seeing Chris Rietsma come up through the programs here and do so well and become a high draft pick. And even though the seasons are short and we didn't play that many games, just to have that exposure and for him to draw a bunch of scouts up here to watch him, that was an eye-opening experience for me.
When did you realize that this might be a dream worth chasing rather than just, hey, this is a fun game to play?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it was when we first started the dogs team, we went down to the States maybe once our first year, and we started doing that more frequently, and we started competing with teams from Florida and Texas and California, and we were beating some of them, and if not beating them, we were right in the game with them. And can't recall off the top of my head, but we're playing against guys that have first round draft picks and guys going on scholarship to Pac-12 schools and big time programs, and just to be able to compete with those guys through the dogs program, I think a lot of us started to realize that we can make a go of this, and we're not just having fun with it and then going to carry on with our lives, that we can actually make a run at this.
So then obviously you managed to make a good go of it, and it starts going at college. And what did you take away from that experience?
Yeah, that was an incredible time at Lewis Clark State. Even though we had the dogs program, it was, at that point in time, it was still tough to get down to the States. It still is, but it's a little different now with the age of video, and there's just so much more access to be able to see players. But back then it was very hard to get down there, and quite a few of us off the original dogs program got scholarships, and I got down to play at Lewis Clark State for Ed Sheff, who's a legendary coach in the NAI ranks, and he's won, I think it was 13 or 14 national championships at that time. He won a few more, and just to get down there and get exposed to a lot of my teammates were from California and the West Coast, Oregon, that kind of thing, that played a ton of baseball growing up. So I redshirted my first year. It was a huge learning curve for me, just to go from facing guys that are throwing 85 miles an hour to all of a sudden 92, 93 with good off-speed pitches. It was a huge learning curve. So it was an incredible learning experience, and Coach Sheff runs a tight ship down there, or ran quite a tight ship down there. So it was great. I was only 17 when I left to go to school, so I had a lot of growing to do physically and mentally, and it was a great time there.
Was that a tough transition, going from being the big fish in little pond to kind of the little fish in a big pond?
Yeah, definitely. It was you kind of have to swallow your pride a little bit, especially when you're redshirting like that. I played in the fall scrimmages, but didn't play a game at all my first spring. Maybe got into a couple exhibition games, but to just sit there and watch your teammates play, that's tough. But it motivates you, or at least it motivated me to really work hard and put in that extra time in the batting cage and in the weight room. And I wanted to get back on the field on the team that I thought I was supposed to be playing on, and that was a huge motivating thing for me. And I definitely needed it. I'm not saying it was a bad decision. I needed that year to develop and kind of catch up, so it worked out really well.
Obviously, because you ended up getting drafted by Texas, 13th round, 2003 draft. Do you remember where you were when you got that phone call?
Yeah, I was at home here in Calgary with my family, my mom and dad, and my brother, and that was such an exciting day. There was a few of us, Jim Henderson as well, and a couple of the other dogs that thought there'd be a chance to get drafted. But when you're going through that process, you really have no idea what to expect. You're hearing a few different things from the scouts and the teams that you've talked to, but until you go through the day, you have really no idea what's going to happen. And got the call, and it was just such an exciting day to, reach that milestone and then realize that you have such a incredible opportunity in front of you.
What did that mean to you to be a kid from Calgary, from Western Canada, who managed to get selected and then actually end up going and playing some pro ball?
Yeah, that was huge. It was a really proud day for me and my family and the dogs program and generally baseball in Alberta. It was a good time for baseball in Alberta. There was a lot of people, not just with the dogs, but all over the province that were getting down to the States and playing college ball. And then a few of us were fortunate to take it to that next step. So you just reflect on where you started and, playing Cal West Little League and all-star teams and all that. It was a long journey, and, you enjoy it for a little while, and then you kind of go back to the same thing where you're a little fish in a big pond again, starting at the bottom of the minor leagues.
Yeah, and you went through every level, all the way up to AAA for a few seasons as well. Take us back to that time and some of the memories you have from your days in the minors.
Yeah, definitely. It was the learning experience at college was dwarfed by the learning experience in pro ball. It's just everything's ratcheted up that much more. It's all the top guys from all the college programs, and you don't have school to worry about anymore. It's for lack of a better word, it's a full-time job that you dedicate yourself to, and you have a lot to learn. You start playing against guys, pretty early on that are 4, 5, 6 years older than you, and a lot more physically mature. So you have to put in the time and the work to develop. And I fortunately was with the Rangers. It was a great organization. We had plenty of resources to accomplish that, but you're back. You don't have any teammates that you played with previously for the most part. You're getting to meet a bunch of new guys from all different backgrounds, and you all have the same goal in mind to make it to the big leagues. And you're competing on the field every day. It was a great experience.
Any players that you either played with or against that really stood out to you where you went, oh, they're definitely going to the bigs?
Yeah, there's a few along the way. I played with Ian Kinsler early on in the Texas organization, and he ended up I think he just retired a few weeks ago, actually. He had a long run in the big leagues. You could tell right away that, he was something special. There's a few other ones along the way. I played against Mike Trout in AA, and the way the ball came off his bat was just unbelievable. It was like nothing I'd ever seen before. You knew he was going to be good right away as soon as you saw him play. And got to play with Jose Altuve and a couple other guys that have gone on to be all-stars. And yeah, it's fun playing with those guys because you can see how easy they make the game look, but it's not easy, and you learn a lot from them too, being around guys that can perform at that high of a level every day or most days, and it ups your own game just being exposed to that.
I know in talking to a lot of players, past and present, is that it's one thing to talk about the players, it's another to talk about the memories, whether it's the road trips, the off-field stuff. Anything stick out to you as maybe some of your favorite memories of your days playing pro ball?
Oh yeah, for sure. The long bus rides and all. Like I always look back and so thankful to play minor league baseball, and those memories are something I'll never forget. But the thing that sticks out to me the most is just the opportunity to play for Team Canada. It was you know those guys a little better. You're not worried about who's going to get called up next or who's getting sent down next. You're really just trying to win and play for your country, and winning's the only thing that matters. And those teams came together so quickly, and you're on a road trip, overseas or wherever, so you're spending a lot of time together, and you're really bonding. And there's numerous stories about having dinner in Italy and for the World Cup over there, and grapes flying around, and Larry Walker getting hit in the eye randomly. Like there's lots of things that memories that I'll cherish, especially from those Canadian teams.
You mentioned the Canada side of it. What did it mean to you to don the maple leaf?
Yeah, it was an incredible opportunity. You grow up dreaming of playing in the major leagues, and that's the ultimate goal. But until you put that jersey on, you don't really realize how special it is. I was fortunate to play on the junior team in 2001, and that kind of, got the fire going for Baseball Canada. And then it was 5 years later, so it was a bit of a gap before I played on the senior team. And it's just an incredible thing to play with guys from all across the country and really come together. And one of our major highlights was winning the gold in 2011 at the Pan Am Games, and just being able to do that for your country and grow really the exposure to baseball around here. The Blue Jays have done a great job of that over the last 5 or 6 years. There was a bit of a lull there, but just to grow the game in Canada and be a part of that was something that was very special.
All along the journey, any teammates, any coaches who really stood out, or people just in general who really made an impact on not just the baseball side of it, but also life?
Yeah, all the way back to my college coach, Ed Sheff. You realize later on in life how much you learn when you're 17, 18, 19 years old. He really instilled a strong work ethic. He taught us to play the game the right way. And then even back further to the Dogs program, John Urcandia, as well as a lot of the other dads. There was a group of about 4 or 5 of our dads that kind of ran the show at the beginning, and just to see how passionate they were about the game, and for us to take that and run with it, it was a great starting point.
When you look back on all of those people, any piece of advice that really stuck out to you, that has stuck with you throughout, whether it be baseball or even current life now as a corporate lawyer?
Yeah, it's surprising how much of what you learn in sports translates to the real world once you're done playing. It's just the moral values. I wouldn't say there's one piece of advice, but baseball's, despite what's happened recently, it's an honest game for the most part, and you have to be honest with yourself about how you're performing. You have to be honest with your teammates, to give an honest effort, and it shows if you're dogging it on the base paths or in the weight room. Your teammates and coaches, they pick up on that, and it sets a tone just to try to be your best self as often as you can be. And you being part of a team that is all pulling in the right direction. You don't want to be the one that's letting everyone else down. So I just value where I came from and how I grew up in the game so much, and it's helped me so much in my next career.
If you were surrounded by a bunch of young athletes here right now, and you had to give them some words of wisdom from your days, what would you tell them?
I think just kind of what I thought growing up is that even though you're growing up in Canada, and if you're playing baseball or really any sport, you really can take it as far as you want, and hard work and effort is going to take you a long way. So many people are blessed with talent, and some aren't, but hard work and effort and dedication can really make up for a lot of that. There's some of the guys I played with in AA and AAA were not the most talented people around, and they made it that far, and some made it to the big leagues despite that, just because they had a plan and they worked hard, and they really loved what they did. And that can take you a long way.
Final question for you. When you look back at the baseball side of things, what are you most proud of?
That's a good question. I think our performance on the Canadian team really, we won the gold medal. We had a couple bronze medals with the World Cup. Just, it feels like our group of players kind of ushered in a new era of Canadian baseball. You see, more and more guys getting selected in higher rounds, and it's not simply because of us on the national team. There's a lot of like Joey Votto and Justin Morneau and those guys doing so well at the big league level. But I think just that little bit of extra exposure on the national team and us doing well, however little bit that helps, that's definitely what I'm most proud of.
Emerson, thanks so much for joining us and sharing some of your insights and your memories.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate you having me.
Thanks again to Emerson Frostad for joining us this week, and as always, thanks to you for downloading and listening. In case you missed the news earlier this week, we have added another podcast platform to our lineup. You can now listen in on Stitcher, as well as Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Podbean, and Spotify. If you haven't already, make sure to leave us a rating and review if you can, as those kinds of things help spread the word about the podcast. Until next time, thanks again for all of your support, no matter the platform, of Alberta Dugout Stories.